Chapter 27. We're going to be talking about the Baroque Concerto and the composer Antonio Vivaldi and his compositions, particularly his violin concertos, The Four Seasons. One of the uh, things that I want you to know about the concerto is that it is a piece for one or more instruments combined with a larger orchestral ensemble. So there's two main components to the concerto. We've got either the soloist or the small group of instruments in contrast to a larger orchestra. There are three movements or three separate sections in a concerto, typically the allegro, the adagio, and then the allegro, labeled by its speed of rhythm. Okay, allegro, adagio, allegro, all those two Italian words refer to the speed of it, how fast or how slow it was. And really, this was about different experiments in how the instruments sounded against each other, solo versus grouping versus orchestra. And it was also a chance for the virtuoso to really show off, which was a favored pastime and a favorite thing that people loved to hear in music. So it was a very common type of composition. The concerto was really popular. So if you want to Google concerto, there will be tons of opportunities to listen. You may even enjoy it for some study music, perhaps. All right, so a couple of things about form. The first and third movements of the concerto. Remember, it's a three-movement piece, so it's a larger work with smaller components within it. Very important to know that it's three movements and that the first and the third movement are in ritornello form. What ritornello form means, it's a refrain-based structure. When you think of refrain, I want you to think about changing refrain to chorus if this were a word or a song with words. If this was a vocal composition, we might think of the refrain as the chorus of the piece. So it's refrain-based, which means it has this section that continues to come and repeat throughout the piece, throughout the movement that's played by the orchestra. In between those refrains, those little repetitive sections, you're going to have something called an episode by the soloist or group of soloists. These episodes the episodes were for the soloists. So they would do their little virtuosic outbursts, and then the refrain would come. So the refrain would really tie everything together. But it was about the stability and the depth and the color of the orchestra as compared to the virtuosity of the solo or soloists and their flexibility. When you only have a few instruments, you can do a lot more than when you have a group of instruments. It really was developed in Italy, and people loved it, performers and audiences alike. It went north very quickly. One of the most famous pieces were the Brandenburg concertos written by Bach. The most famous ones, the composers of this time period, was a man named Antonio Vivaldi. And he was a very prolific composer of his era. And he was born in 1678, died in 1741. He was from Venice, and he was a violinist by trade. He was also an ordained priest, and he was nicknamed the Red Priest for his hair, although this is a wig, so you're not really going to see his red hair here. He became the music master at a Conservatory dell'Ospedale della Pietà, which is a very long name, but it's a conservatory, a school basically attached to an orphanage for girls in Venice. And the concerts they put on attracted visitors from all over Europe. Now, one thing you need to know is that Venice was major, still is, but was major tourist attraction. So everybody loved the music, and they came to hear these girls play because they loved the music of Vivaldi. So he really was renowned during his lifetime as a performer, and then very soon after as a composer. He was considered the father of the concerto, and he really established this form called the ritornello form. That's that refrain against the episodes that I just described. His violin style became very distinct with rapid scale passages, arpeggios, contrasting registers. So he was quite a player of the violin. He wrote over 500 concertos, and 230 of those were for solo violin, which makes sense since that was his instrument. He also wrote symphonias and operas and other vocal music. So you're going to take a look at one of his most famous pieces. You've probably heard pieces of this, if not little snippets of the tunes, because it's most famous of his compositions, and it's played in lots of different places. I mean, even cartoons will sample this type of orchestral music. And it was for four solo violin. It was of four concertos, each one for each season. So four different seasons. You've got spring, summer, fall, winter. And it was considered program music. We'll talk a little more about that at another time. But program music just means that the music is telling a story of sorts. It's linked to something written. And in this case, it was linked to poetry. And that poetry would have actually been printed above the music. The music portrays what the text is saying. So the action and emotion of the text is coming to life with the music. If you think about, for instance, watching a movie, the music kind of adds this suspense, this intensity to what you're seeing in a movie, or whatever emotion. Maybe it's not intensity, but adds that emotion. Reverse that. Imagine that you've got text, the music is being written to bring that text alive, and you're creating the visuals in your head. But it's the same kind of idea. That's what program music is. It's music that's associated with something written, some literary link. Now, that doesn't mean there's words. There's no one actually singing the music. It's just suggesting what the music is saying by linking it to something printed. Here's a picture of the famous Venice Orphanage, a concert there. Gives you an idea of how it might be set up. And here is a group of musicians playing the Baroque violin, so it's a little bit different, and a long-necked lute, which is called the theorbo. You can see that in the picture. So take a listen to the Four Seasons. We're going to listen to the first movement, which was published in 1725. You're going to hear the orchestral ritornello, which is the refrain, and then you're going to hear that alternating with the solo violin episodes. And the violin is the one that's going to be depicting sounds of spring, picturing birds, a storm. You can hear this kind of final violin passage leading to the last refrain. There's a listening guide here for you. It'll have the words of the poem that it was associated with, but there won't be actually words. You're just listening to instrumental music. Listen for that flashy solo violin. Listen to how that ritornello unifies the whole piece. And listen to the expression of images like birds, brooks, breeze, and storm. Thank you.